This begins media number 2 in the deposition of Todd Dean. The time on the monitor is 10:49 a.m. We are back on the record.
You still have Exhibit 9 in front of you, sir?
I do.
Do you see that this is email correspondence between you and a variety of people from January 2012?
The only correspondence I have on this document is between me and Teresa Crawford.
Well, you see that it's part of a long thread.
Into the district on the second portion, excuse me.
And this is following up again related to that Opana ER shortage that we were just talking about. Do you see that?
I do.
And then Bill Nichols forwards to you this email of January 18th, 2012. Do you see that middle of the page on the first page?
I do.
I'm going to read a little bit of that. He starts off, great pharmacy call below relative to Opana ER from Amy Painter in Florida. Note that the partnership that Amy is establishing with the pharmacist to meet patient needs. The pharmacist is the person who has to deal face-to-face with the patient's frustration over not having their meds available. Let's help them better serve their patient customers. Pharmacy calls are critical right now. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And then you respond back, it appears, by forwarding this message on to your sales team. And it says, great example of getting close to your pharmacist and what it can do for your business. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And you say, let's go get this Opana business. Did I read that correctly?
Objection form.
I guess it says, let's get this Opana business. Did I read that correctly?
That's what it states in the email.
And then Teresa Crawford, who again I think we've established is a rep operating in Tennessee, right?
In Chattanooga, yes.
Responds back to you. I just left my largest pain office that I had breakfast with last week. Deb Gray, NP, stopped me for more copay cards and said since Thursday they are trying to switch patients from Opana. This is what she told me she was going to do, so let's hope they go through. They normally don't do PAs, but I've already done some and waiting for response. Did I read that correctly?
That's what it says in the email, yes.
Do you know what the PA reference is there?
I don't.
So here's an email of Teresa Crawford informing you about her largest pain office, right? That's her description of where she just left. Right?
Based on the shortage of Opana ER, yes.
So, and this is just a few days after you directed her to go contact her big Opana ER writers, right?
9 days later, yeah.
And she says that she just left the largest pain office, right?
That's what it states in the sentence, yeah.
And so that's a reference to how many Opana ER scripts are being written by this?
No, it's not.
It's not a reference to the number of scripts that are being written by this office, the largest?
Largest pain office could be number of patients. It doesn't say anything about number of scripts.
Well, you guys don't get information on the number of patients that physicians have. You get information on the number of scripts they're writing.
Objection.
I would just say generally you know by volume when you walk into an office if they're busy or not.
That's because there's long lines there?
Objection.
No, not necessarily.
So, and then she's talking about how she's getting that largest pain office to switch over from writing Opana ER scripts, right?
She's talking about a conversation she had with a nurse practitioner, which I don't even know in the state of Tennessee that a nurse practitioner can write an opioid.
Okay.
But
So-
again, this is 8 years ago. I don't recall.
But generally speaking, when your reps go into the offices, especially the largest pain office in their district, they're trying to interact with the people who have prescription power writing authority, right?
I think they're trying to gather information, but what they're doing is talking about the prescribing information with those who actually can write the therapy. So if she had a general conversation with a Deb Gray, whether she had writing power or not, I can't define at this point in time.
And you had this email correspondence again after you were informed that Tennessee was plagued by bad laws and flooded with pill mills, right?
Objection.
We had this interaction based on Opana-ER, which is an FDA-approved drug. If used appropriately, appropriate for chronic pain, and Exalgo ER, appropriately if by the PI is used appropriately, appropriate for the use of chronic pain.
But January 2012 is after, in time, September of 2011, right?
It goes back to the earlier context. I think you're trying to stretch, but chronologically, yes.
And so it's fair to say that you sent this email, and this email exchange occurred after you were informed that Tennessee was plagued by bad laws and flooded with pill mills, right?
Objection form, objection asked and
This has nothing to do with pill mills. This has to do with a shortage of a therapy appropriately prescribed with another therapy that potentially is appropriately prescribed to
Well-
chronic pain patients.
If you don't know what a pill mill is, how do you know if this email is or is not in reference to a pill mill?
Objection.
I think pill mill is a vague term that's never been defined.
You would agree with me that pill mills are where a large number of opioid prescriptions are being written from, right?
Objection vague.
I mean, a pill mill could be for any therapeutic drug.
Are
you know,
you
generally?
Are you aware of any pill mill being indicted for writing a bunch of Tylenol prescriptions?
No, I'm not. I wasn't in that space. I'd never sold over-the-counter Tylenol or prescribed Tylenol.
Anybody describe somebody who has a lot of Pin-Said prescriptions as a pill mill?
A topical? No. Okay.
See that this is February 2012 email correspondence between you and some members of your sales team.
Briefly, yes.
And it begins with this email from Krista Woodworth. Do you see that?
I do.
And the subject is AARP potential is in Tennessee. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And she emails it to you and says, Todd, good afternoon. As you'll remember from the email I sent out last night, the South Carolina district is ranked number 2 in the country in terms of Opana ER Exalgo volume through UHC AARP Med D. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
My natural next question was, which of your specific territories are responsible for most of this volume? Therefore, I did some research this morning and found out that your Tennessee territories carry most of this volume. Did I read that correctly?
From her email, yes.
In light of the difficult managed care environment that exists in Tennessee, this is great news. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And she attaches this Excel spreadsheet, right?
Yeah.
That lists the Opana ER monthly scripts for the territories, right?
I can't verify that. It doesn't. Yeah, it does say Urbana. Yes.
And then you reply back, folks, this is a tremendous opportunity. Please read below and see the corresponding data. Great stuff. 1, 2, 3, 4 exclamation points. Money is to be had here, TD. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And so this again is after the correspondence that we were just looking at regarding the Opana ER production problems, right?
Right.
And then you see that, again, let me back up and go back to Krista Woodworth's email. You see that she directs your representatives to the Managed Care tab in IMS Performance Analytics for greater detail. Do you see that?
No, she encourages me to direct the representatives.
A fair point.
I don't recall directing them to look at that tab.
So, well, you forwarded on to Chris Clark and Teresa Crawford, right?
Yes.
And Eric Heichman.
Yes.
These are the sales reps in your territory operating in Tennessee at this time, right?
That sounds correct.
And then they're directed to go look either through this email from Krista or you forwarding it to them to go look at the IMS Performance Analytics for greater detail, right?
Can I hear that read back? I'm sorry.
And then they're directed to go look either through this email from Krista or you forwarding it to them to go look at the IMS Performance Analytics for greater detail, right?
Objection form. Objection asked and answered.
You can answer the question, sir.
I just asked them to read below. What they actually did with it would be up to them to interpret.
Well, you would agree with me that IMS Performance Analytics data relates to the number of scripts that doctors are writing, right?
Generally, yes, but I mean, it's up to their interpretation as to who they may be able to impact and where a potential shortage of a FDA-approved therapy is short, and to provide providers with another option in case their patients have breakthrough pain.
Well, there's nothing in here about breakthrough pain, right? This is just how you're trying to divvy up your sales representative resources, right?
Objection to the form.
No, the whole premise of it is that there's a shortage of Opana ER, which you stated. What we're saying is that Exalgo ER is another appropriately FDA-approved therapy that is available to the providers.
And your response to that in this email from Krista is that money is to be made in Tennessee as a result of these opportunities, right?
Every pharma company encourages their reps to grow their use of therapy based on reviewing prescribing information with their provider. If there's a shortage of one therapy and ours is available, they're going to grow their business, in theory.
And you sent this email after you informed that Tennessee was plagued by bad laws and flooded with pill mills, right?
Objection form.
Again, you're trying to connect the word pill mill to this email. It's two independent emails with two independent content of information.
But all I'm trying to get is that February 2012 is after September 11, or September of 2011, right?
Objection asked and answered.
Your chronological question again for the last three emails is it's post that question, yes. Sorry. Okay.
So you see that this is email correspondence from April 2012, right?
Yes.
And it's between you and a variety of people, but it begins with this really big email from Mike Patterson to a whole host of individuals. You see that?
Objection form.
Yes.
Well, you would agree with me that there's a lot of people on this first email from Mike Patterson, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't need to count them up. We can agree that there's a lot of people on this email, right?
Sure.
So, and it's directed to the field sales force. Do you see that?
Yes.
And you see, I want to direct your attention to the the third paragraph down beginning, we have received multiple success stories.
This is on 194?
Yeah.
Okay.
It states, we have received multiple success stories on how the new messaging has helped move Exalgo up in the treatment algorithm. South Carolina District Manager Todd Dean shared the following story highlighting the impact Matt Goddard had with new MSA. Did I see that? Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
What's the new MSA?
Master Sales Aid is what I recall.
Matt was able to use the new PK data within the MSA to get into a very meaningful discussion. Specifically, they discussed the PK spike with IR hydromorphone 8 milligram, contrasted against the strengths of Exalgo, all the way to the PK profile of 32 milligram and the justification for once daily dosing with Exalgo. As they went through their discussion and analysis of this data, Dr. T actually stopped Matt, took the MSA from him, and closely reviewed it in his own hands. He looked at Matt and said, "This is exactly the dilemma we are in with these chronic pain patients every day. I need to use more Exalgo." Dr. T is Matt's #1 Opana ER writer target in Charleston. Matt does a great job highlighting that Exalgo is not IR hydromorphone, but rather the efficacy of hydromorphone in an innovative once-daily delivery system. Combining this type of sales message with an appropriate patient type enables you to elevate Exalgo earlier in your customer's treatment algorithm. Did I read all that correctly?
Yes.
So what you're describing here is an interaction where Matt, one of your sales representatives, went in and had a successful event with a physician to have him start writing more Exalgo scripts, right?
No, I think what Matt did was go in and educate him based on new prescribing information, going from a 16 milligram to a 32 milligram. And with the attached information, it shows you that on page 4 and page 7. But the master sales aid would be developed directly from FDA-approved prescribing information.
Well,
so when I refer to slide 4 of the information you provided me today, the OROS technology is a technology that allows the therapeutic effect of the drug to be released over a 24-hour period. When I refer to page 7, it shows you a pharmacological chart with the dark line showing that it's released over a 24-hour period. And the reference story that Matt had success with was talking about the lack of a spike with Exalgo, and that it was released over a 24-hour period appropriately approved by the FDA.
so, and you see that there's this reference to the MSA and the doctor looking at it, right?
Yes.
And then after the doctor has interacted with the MSA and Matt, he appears to be willing to write more Exalgo scripts, right?
I think he's considering a new form of 32 milligram Exalgo because they have challenges, or had challenges as I recall, with Opana with breakthrough pain.
But what Mike Patterson sends to the field sales force based on this vignette that you've told him, and he almost is quoting somebody as saying that the doctor said, "I need to use more Exalgo," right? Which suggests, I think, certainly to anybody reading this document, that the doctor is now going to be starting writing more scripts for Exalgo based on this interaction with Matt where he's reviewed this MSA, right?
I'll object to the form of the question.
No, what he's sharing is that Matt appropriately used the training of the new material on an extended release therapy that's FDA approved as a potential therapeutic option. What he's also sharing is that they have, and I'll quote in his line, "This is exactly the dilemma that we're in. My understanding would be that they had breakthrough pain and they're looking for an extended release therapy that doesn't provide a spike but gives a therapeutic option to their chronic pain patients," as he references in the second to the last sentence.
Do you want the jury to believe that the MSA in this vignette that you're describing didn't have an impact on the doctor's understanding of Exalgo?
Objection mischaracterizes his testimony.
So there's two things. Number one, I wasn't part of that interaction with
Yep.
Matt and the doctor, so it'd be speculative for me to answer, and the MSA is strictly not only approved by the FDA, but it's based on the prescribing information approved by the FDA.
And so, and I get all that. In the MSA, Is that the document that's attached here?
Objection, lack of foundation.
I don't know if this is a abbreviated MSA or if it's just highlighted portions of the MSA. I can't speak to that. Again, this is almost 9 years ago.
No problem. So let's flip to this. I want to specifically look at slide 5.
Okay.
And we saw earlier this reference to, I think it was the Todd and Eva thing that you had in your email. Do you recall that? To using the Todd and Eva. Go back with that. Yeah, if you go back to what I think is 6, when you were directing your sales reps to use the big Opana ER writers, you used the phrase, emphasize the positives of Exalgo with Tom and Eva case studies, right?
Objection form. I don't think you mean to refer to Exhibit 6.
I don't know if that's directly correlated to Exhibit 6 here with this particular piece of information or not.
Well, you don't recall the email that we just looked at that said emphasizing the positives of Exalgo with Tom and Eva case studies?
5 documents ago? No, I don't recall it. I can pull 6 back out if you're asking me to.
Well, is it pull out the January 9th, 2012 email.
Todd, I think you're looking for 8.
Okay, because 6 is from July of 24. July 24th, excuse me, of 11.
Okay, so whatever January 9th, 2012 is.
For the record, you're looking for Exhibit 8.
8. Okay, and your question?
Does that refresh your recollection that you have in the past encouraged your sales representatives to use the Tom and Eva case studies in their sales presentations for Exalgo?
If they were approved by the brand team and they were referred to Exalgo utilization, yes. I don't know if that's a direct correlation to the Exhibit 11 you gave to me.
And that's where we're going. So let's look at slide 5 as part of the attachment in Exhibit 11.
Okay.
And it says, bullet point 1, how Exalgo may help patients like Eva.
Okay.
Do you see that?
I do.
And then under bullet point 2, there is a reference to the Moore study. Do you see that?
I see it referenced here, yes.
And so apparently the Moore study is one of the items that the sales staff should be discussing with patient or with doctors in their Exalgo sales presentations, right?
Objection form. Objection mischaracterizes the document. Objection lack of foundation.
I don't know that I can answer that. I did not sell the therapy to the provider.
Well, let's just read the document then. It says, but wait, there's more, right? Number 2. But wait, there's more. Use the chart from the Moore study to contrast the PK profiles of IR hydromorphone and Exalgo. Steady once daily dosing provides a consistent release of medication to get Eva through the entire day and night with reduced peaks and troughs. Did I read all that correctly?
You did on this document, yes.
So when the document here states use the chart from Moore study, you don't think that that's a reference that the sales representatives in their Exalgo sales presentation should be using the Moore study to make this point?
Objection.
I don't know if they use this in their sales presentations. If this information would have been approved by the FDA, then it would have been appropriate at that time for them to potentially provide to a provider.
Well, you would agree with me that the document says use the chart from the Moore study.
That's what this document says, yeah.
Okay, so let's flip over and
Where are we going?
to number 7.
Okay.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, on 6. And it says another case for Exalgo, the second patient profile describes Patrick. Now we saw in Exhibit 8 the reference was to Tom, but here the reference is to Patrick. Do you see that?
I see on this it says the second patient profile describes Patrick.
Sure.
Yes.
And we see under bullet point 2, once again, more on more. Did I read that correctly?
That's what it says here.
And it says here you can use the more chart to illustrate the steady delivery of medication provided by Exalgo throughout the 24-hour period. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And so, again, this document is directing sales staff under your supervision to use the more chart to illustrate the steady delivery of medication provided by Exalgo, right?
Not in that context. This is information provided by the brand team as a potential resource, but it would have been submitted to the FDA for approval before they could use it in the marketplace.
And I understand that. And so, and then if you go back to the cover of this email, you have this reference to the MSA that apparently was used for at least this one doctor in Charleston in this successful sales presentation that you described that then goes out to the entire field sales force, right?
Objection. As soon as the fact this is not the MSA attached.
This is not the MSA attached. In fact, the
Counsel,
document,
this is the 5th time that you
know what, Ben?
It's ridiculous. You know what you're doing is totally inappropriate.
No, you're asking a totally inappropriate question. You're asking a question.
You
Wait a minute,
can
Ben.
clean it up when it's your time to ask this guy questions.
You're asking this.
But right now, you are directing this witness on the record to give different testimony, and you need to stop. And I'm happy to call the judge and get this to stop.
I
if
would
that's
be
the point
happy
that
to
we're
call the
going
judge.
get.
You're sitting here asking this witness a question.
You make
that
your
suggests-
objections.
that
You make
suggests-
your objections. You need to
Ben,
stop directing
all right,
your witness.
I'm going to let you finish, and then you're going to let me finish.
No, I'm not going to let you finish because this is my deposition and I get to ask the questions. If you want to come in and clean something up that you think that I've got wrong, you can do that. But you're going to stop with your speaking objections, stop directing this witness, because what came out of your mouth directly came out of this witness's mouth, and it needs to stop when it's on the record. So I'm going to continue to ask my questions.
Ben, are you done?
I'm done. I'm not
Okay,
letting
then-
your speaking objection is noted, and you need to stop directing the
All
witness.
right, and I'm about to tell you, and I'm about to explain the objection. The objection is you asked this witness a question about an MSA in a document that doesn't attach the MSA. It says on its face that this is the implementation guide. That is misleading. I am not going to sit here and let you mislead the witness.
Okay, well, your speaking objections need to stop because they're totally inappropriate, and you're directing this witness on the record to give testimony that you want to give.
I will make a non-misleading record as I see fit.
So, going back to this email, okay?
can I answer what you had asked me
Sure.
before we were interrupted on both sides? On this document, number one, it is not the MSA. If you look at the top of every single page, it says, for sales training purposes only, do not disseminate. So when you say do not disseminate, that means do not share with providers. What Matt shared was the MSA, which is not attached to this communication. What this is that you've attached is not to be disseminated. It's for training purposes only.
Sure. Training sales.
Internally.
Okay. And I get that. Training sales. This is the document, is the internal training, is the document used to train sales representatives in the field on how to use the MSA, right?
No, this is not the MSA. This is a document for training. It's an implementation guide. It is not the MSA. And the quote that was used that you try to stretch and connect to Matt Goddard's reference is the MSA. It says Matt Goddard had with the new MSA. It doesn't say Matt Goddard had with the implementation guide, which is stated on every single page. for sales training purposes only, do not disseminate.
And I understand that. And then the document that's attached to the email is listed as the whole story sales aid leave behind implementation guide, right?
I'm looking at the document. It says do not disseminate, which means to the representatives, do not leave behind. This is for internal use only.
Sure. For sales training purposes only, do not disseminate.
That's right.
So this is for training salespeople, right?
It's for their understanding of information. Yes.
Sure, sure. And that's all I'm trying to get at. And in the way that the sales representatives were trained was, according to paragraph 5, to use the chart from the Moore study to contrast the PK profiles of IR hydromorphone and Exalgo, right? Exact quote.
And it's understanding, but again, the quote that you're referencing to a Matt Goddard, who was in my district, was to a master sales aide, not this material provided.
Sure. And I understand that. But the point is that sales representatives, according to this document, in interactions with physicians, are directed to use the Moore chart and study in their interactions with physicians, right?
Objection, form, objection mischaracterizes the document.
The sales training implementation guide is data to consider. The reference to the quote to Matt Goddard is the MSA. That's two different documents.
Yeah, and then do you see that there is on paragraph 5, there is at the very top, there is an image of a woman and some charts. Do you see that?
Witness appears to be looking at the email. Where are you?
I'm looking at the email, your paragraph 5.
I'm sorry, page 5 of the attachment.
Can I ask for clarity? Who attached the sales implementation guide to this? Was this you, or was this connected to the email?
These are the documents as they've been produced to us.
Object.
Yeah, I don't know that that's a correlating document to the email.
Okay.
I mean, the only thing that I see is on page 1 where it says Penn said logo of any attachment and another JPEG, MAL Covidian tail JPEG. I don't know that they correspond to the email.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm asking for clarity because I don't know who attached the implementation guide when the majority of the email talks about a master sales aid, which would have been submitted to the FDA for approval.
And I understand that. So let's just clean up the record here. And I understand. Your testimony is that the email relates to the MSA and that the attachment is not the MSA. Get that. No problem. You would agree with me that the attachment, however, is for sales training purposes only, related to the whole story sales aid leave behind implementation guide, right?
My understanding is it says do not disseminate, and it's for background information for context.
Okay.
But it's separate from the email when it references Matt Goddard about the MSA utilization.
Got it. And then let's flip over to for the attachment for sale that's identified as for sales training purposes only. Do
Yep.
not disseminate. You with me?
Yep.
Let's go over to page 5 of that document.
Okay.
Now, page 5 has at the very top an image. Do you see that?
Of the female?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And that image, do you know what that image is of?
The female or the chart?
Well, when I say the image, I'm referring to this entire thing right here.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
Do you know what that image is from?
I'm assuming it's from the implementation guide
Okay.
for background information. And according to this document on page 5, it's trying to establish what would be an appropriate Exalgo patient.
Sure. And it gives this patient profile for this woman that's named Eva.
Right, but when it says do not disseminate, there's often times where a brand team will come up with information that doesn't get approved for utilization in the field by the FDA. So I can't tell you if this was ever used in the field other than for background information for sales training only.
And I understand that. But you would agree with me that the document says that it states under paragraph 2 in the EVA study, use the chart from the Moore study to contrast the PK profiles of IR, hydromorphone, and Exalgo, right?
That's what this page 5 says on that particular point.
And so the sales team, according to this document, was being trained to use the Moore study, right?
Objection, mischaracterizes the document, objection, lack of foundation, objection, form.
It says do not disseminate it on this article. This is background information then.
Okay, then how are the sales representatives to use the chart from Moore?
They weren't, according to this. I don't have an FDA approved market sales piece in front of me to say that's what you should use that was approved. As far as I know, is the document you provided, it says on every single page, do not disseminate, which means do not share in the public view. I don't have anything in front of me that says here's what was utilized in the field.
Okay, so let's flip over to paragraph 7.
Page 7 or paragraph?
Sorry,
Page 7? Okay.
It says, explain the efficacy of Exalgo. Now is a good time to remind physicians of the efficacy of Exalgo. The pivotal trial, HAIL study, is a great way to do this. Did I read that correctly?
Where is that located on the document? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, upper left-hand corner in the gray chart area.
Yes. Sorry, I was looking more at the body of it.
No problem. So were sales staff trained to explain the efficacy of Exalgo to doctors?
I wouldn't stretch that far. I think that they were taking in background sales information. When it says do not disseminate, that's a real jump to say what was approved that they ultimately, by the FDA, were allowed to share with a doctor.
Okay.
So it's a very distinct difference. I mean, it's one thing to get it's like for me to read a Webster dictionary, and then what I actually use in the public that's approved could be two different things.
No problem. And then the document goes on to say something HCPs may consider when choosing a dose for starting Exalgo. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And it says it may help physicians to know that the median starting dose in the HAIL study was 16 milligrams and the median final dose was 32 milligrams, right? That's what the document says.
That's what the document says.
This may surprise some physicians who start patients on 8 milligrams regardless of the conversion ratio from their previous medication. Did I read that correctly?
That's what it says on this document.
Point out how proper dosing can provide the efficacy physicians are looking for in their opioid-tolerant chronic pain patients. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
If it worked in the HAIL study, it may work for them. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And so were sales representatives trained to use the HAIL study in their sales presentations with doctors?
Objection, form.
Again, if this was prepared by the brand team for sales training, I don't know if it ever was utilized, number one. And number two, it's in your whole document that you read on point 2, it uses the words may consider. And also it states at the very end, it may work for them based on the HAIL study. But again, this is a sales training document not to be disseminated.
All right, let's go back to the email. So again, from the email from Mike Patterson, directed to the whole field Salesforce team, he goes on to explain that Matt does a great job highlighting that Exalgo is not IR hydromorphone, but rather the efficacy of hydromorphone in an innovative once daily delivery system. Did I read that correctly?
That's what it says in Mike's email.
Combining this type of sales message with an appropriate patient type enables you to elevate Exalgo earlier in your customer's treatment algorithm. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
So it appears, at least here, that the efficacy of hydromorphone is to be used in the sales message, right?
No, it's what it says is the appropriate patient. It's to be potentially considered.
But the way that this is described is that Matt does a great job highlighting, right, that Exalgo is not IR hydromorphone, but rather the efficacy of hydromorphone in an innovative once daily delivery system. So are you trying to convince this jury that the efficacy of hydromorphone was not part of the sales presentation that's described here?
Objection mischaracterizes his testimony.
This is not my quote. This is an email from Mike. So I don't know what you're implying. What I would say is, again, that it's with an appropriate patient, which would have been appropriate to a PI approved by the FDA.
And an appropriate patient are, again, the case profiles that at least you directed back in Exhibit 8 to use the Tom and Eva case studies, right?
I don't know at that time if those were FDA-approved materials. It's to consider case profiles, but the information in there, if it was approved by the FDA to use in the field, then I would have said that.
Well, you wouldn't have directed your sales representatives to use in the field the Tom and Eva case studies if it wasn't something that they were supposed to be using at the field at that time, right?
You haven't provided me with a Tom case study. If Eva is the same Eva that's here, this was for sales training only. And if I would have referenced them to use that in the field, that means it would have been approved by the FDA.
Okay. So, and then going back to the email correspondence of May 25th, 2012, your response to Mike Patterson's email is, "Oh yeah, you know it." Right?
I don't think my response was to him. My response was to the people that were in our sales training class, which were not all people from my district. These are people, so my "oh yeah" was referencing Matt Goddard, who was
Okay.
part of their sales training class. Kind of excited, as I recall, that Matt was referenced in good fun.
Okay.
So those are people from all over the country. When you talk about Caitlin Thrower and others, Michelle Straw, Ed Wetta, who I believe is from the West Coast. These are just people having fun talking about their sales class, referencing one of their sales trainees that were in their class with them.
As a positive way to present Exalgo.
No, as a to say, hey, your buddy Matt Goddard got referenced. It was in fun.
In a positive way.
Objection.
It was in fun calling out Matt Goddard to his colleagues in his sales training class.
Well, do you want this jury to believe that this Matt Goddard vignette was used in this sales force meeting to not encourage other sales folks to do the same thing?
No. What I would infer from Mike's email would just be that Matt Goddard appropriately used an approved document by the FDA, which is a master sales aid, for consideration for appropriate patients.
Before we move on, can we take a short comfort break?
Sure.
Time on the monitor is 11:39 a.m. We are off the record. The time is 11:48 a.m. We are back on the record.
Just going back to Exhibit 11 real quick. So, I want to direct your attention back to the Mike Patterson email.
Okay.
Below where we were just reading, it states to help reinforce. Are you with me?
I'm not. What paragraph or where you at?
It's right
Okay,
below.
I see it now. Middle of the document.
Okay, it says to help reinforce and inspire message strategy and proper use of the new Master Sales Aid and Dosing Guide, we have attached a few educational tools. And it lists 4 educational tools. Do you see that?
I do.
And one of them listed is the Master Sales Aid Implementation Guide. Do you see that?
I see it in his email.
And then it says, this refresher tool reinforces the key inspire messaging in the new MSA as you continue to master the new message strategy. Did I read that correctly?
That's what it says on his email.
And then the document that I was walking with you is labeled as the Whole Story Sales Aid Leave Behind Implementation Guide. And I'll represent to you that according to the way that these documents were produced, this document is attached to this email. So, given that, is it fair to say that the attachment labeled Whole Story Sales Aid is the Master Sales Aid Implementation Guide as referenced in this email?
I'll object
No.
to the form of the question.
I would say no.
Okay. All right, you can put that one aside. Do you see that this is email correspondence of May 3rd, 2012 between Chris Clark?
Ben, just give him a minute. He seems
Yeah,
he's still reading
I'm
it.
still like halfway through this. This is hard to read because it's a run-on paragraph, or more than a paragraph. Okay.
So do you see how this is email correspondence between Chris Clark and you and Bo Hamilton dated May 5th or May 3rd, 2012?
I see, yeah, I see. It's an email from Chris to myself and Bo Hamilton.
And apparently it relates to Advanced Pain Therapeutics of Knoxville.
That's in the subject line, yes.
And it says Todd, who's Bo Hamilton?
He was another representative in East Tennessee.
Todd and Bo, passing along a story on the above clinic that is actually in Bo's territory at 900 East Woodland Avenue. Did I read that correctly?
That's what it says.
It goes on to discuss this visit that he had at this clinic. And I want to direct your attention to the sentence. I know it's hard to read. It says, I knew I had my work cut out. It's about halfway down on the right side.
You're saying halfway through the total piece?
Yeah.
And I knew I had my work cut out. Okay, I got it now.
I knew I had my work cut out, but didn't back down either. He then tells me he made the Opana ER rep cry last week, and she probably wouldn't be back because he told her that if he didn't provide lidoderm patches for his patients, he wouldn't consider using Opana ER. He is from Michigan, by the way. He throws out how my drug is killing people and confuses it with Palladone on several occasions. But we went through the data, discussed the conversions, answered his questions, and at the end he gets up and tells me that I have been a very honest individual with him and he appreciates that, and then walks towards me and gives me a hug. A bit unnerving, but nonetheless a bound was made in that first call. Did I read that correctly?
Objection form.
That's what Chris writes in his email.
Do you know what the reference is a bound was made in that first call?
I have no idea what he means by that.
Is it possibly a typo for a bond?
I have no idea.
I know that this physician are not in my system, and I could not even add them as a business context because of the zip code they are in. But I believe for now I could and can get credit for Diana and would gladly assist Bo in his office going forward. Did I read that correctly?
That's what it says in the email.
So I want to direct your attention to this reference that my drug is killing people. Did that cause you concern when a rep of yours reported that a doctor in your territory thought that the drug was killing people?
Objection form. Objection mischaracterizes the document.
I don't make anything of it. It's a reference in an email. I wasn't there or part of the conversation, so it'd be very hard for me to determine what was the context. And was he talking about Opana? Was he talking about another therapy? Was he talking about, I have no idea. I wasn't there.
Do you know what this reference to Palladone is?
I do not.
Do you know why a physician might be getting Exalgo confused with Palladone?
No.
Do you have any reason why Todd Dean thought that you should become aware of this interaction he had at Advanced Pain Therapeutics?
Can I hear that question read back?
Question, do you have any reason why Todd Dean thought that you should become aware of this interaction he had at Advanced Pain Therapeutics?
I guess I still don't understand the question. So I'm supposed to think of myself in the third person as to why I thought what?
Well, I guess my question, I can't imagine that all your sales reps send you a one-paragraph summary of a meeting for every single time that they go out and meet a physician, right?
No.
And so I'm wondering, because I imagine that this is not the usual course where one of your sales reps gives this one paragraph explanation, if you know why it was done in this instance.
I have no idea. It wasn't even his physicians, as he references in the email.
Okay. Is it 13?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So this is email correspondence from you to your sales team and Bill Nichols from May of 2012. Is that fair?
Yes.
And it begins with this vignette from Chris Clark about a hydrocodone and combo list, right?
That's what he references, yes.
And it's an email from Chris Clark to you on May 17, 2012, and he writes, "Hey Todd, I wanted to share a hopefully potential success story around the utilization of this hydrocodone and combo list and digging into it. A lot of the AHA came from some of these family practitioners that were RXing a lot of hydrocodone and some 60 or so a week of hydrocodone. One particular doc in La Follette that I have known and called on for a long time." Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
Do you know what this reference is to AHA?
I don't.
RXing a lot of hydrocodone means prescribing a lot of hydrocodone, right?
I would believe that to be the case, yeah.
So this is a reference to Chris Clark having a successful interaction with a doctor who is prescribing a lot of hydrocodone, right?
I think it references that, but I can't define that. I don't have the data in front of me to say whether that's true or not. It's Chris's interpretation thereof.
And so then you pass this along to the rest of the sales team, saying that this is a great example of putting an Exalgo hit list to work. Do you see that?
I do.
And then you provide some thoughts, and one of the thoughts is, I'll direct your attention to bulleted item 3, our new PK data in our master visual aid totally makes sense to reduce pill count, offer true once daily pain control, and efficacy. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And in fact, the term efficacy there is all in caps to provide it emphasis, right?
I'm not sure if it is or isn't, but it is in caps.
And so was this you directing your sales team to use the master visual aid to emphasize Exalgo's efficacy in treating pain?
What it references is the pharmacokinetic data in our master vis aid, which would have been approved by the FDA for use in the field to show that they can use Exalgo over a period of 24 hours without breakthrough pain, which is the efficacy I reference.
Is the master visual aid different than the master sales aid?
Objection.
My understanding would be no. This would be approved material by the FDA for the reps to use in the field.
And I get that, and I'm not asking if it's approved by the FDA or not approved by the FDA, but my question is the master visual aid you reference in this email the same as the master sales aid that we were discussing in the previous email?
Objection.
I
Form
think
foundation.
two separate conversations. If I referred to it here, it would have been approved for them to use in the field by the FDA.
Who told you that these things were approved by the FDA?
Objection.
They would not be shipped to us or the representatives for use in the field unless they were approved by the FDA.
How do you know that?
Because the brand team has to submit everything to FDA that's used in general public. It can't be a sales aid. It can't be anything not for dissemination. It has to be approved based on your PI, which is the backbone of every piece of sales information. PI and or corresponding case studies that are approved by the FDA to use in the general public.
And that was your understanding when you were working for Covidian, that the FDA approved these sales documents?
It's my understanding in every pharma company that anything used in the field is approved by the FDA.
Would it surprise you to learn that the FDA does not approve these documents?
Their promotional arm of the FDA absolutely does approve anything used in the field.
Well, they're submitted to the FDA, but they don't have to be approved, right?
Objection.
No,
Form.
my understanding is they have to be approved to be utilized in the field, and it always corresponds to either case study and or PI that's approved by the FDA for the use of that therapy in any given space.
Would it surprise you to learn that that is not true?
Objection. Form.
Again, it's not for me to speculate on what's surprising. I'm telling you how we were instructed to use it from the brand teams and the company.
Thank you, Madam Court Reporter. 14? We're moving right along.
Okay.
See, this is email correspondence from May of 2012 between you and your sales team and Bill Nichols. Subject line, market activity beware.
Yes.
It says team solutions, which I think was the way you described or how you opened the previous email. What is team solutions?
I think at the national level, they had everybody come up with a district name, and that was put out to the team to say, how do you want to be known internally within the company as to what you do on a daily basis, generally.
Got it.
So they came up with the name of Team Solutions. That wasn't dictated by me.
Okay. And it describes some endo activity regarding Opana ER. Is that fair to say?
According to Chris in his territory, this is what happened, and that we should have general awareness.
And it sounds like Endo was sort of trying to be hyper vigilant during this time period and pushing Opana ER out there. Is that fair to say?
Objection form.
Yeah, but what I don't know, reference to what we already talked about earlier in the day, if this was corresponding to a shortage, and it references about halfway through for lost, win back lost business, my assumption would be that their assumption is that us and the other therapeutics that were in that space, that they may have lost some general business with providers, and that they were wanting to increase their frequency to potentially win some of that back with messaging and activity.
Yeah. So, because this is later in the year after they had those production problems that we saw.
Yeah.
And it looks like this was their attempt, probably because their production problems were solved, to sort of win back lost business, right?
Objection.
Don't know that for sure, but that chronologically makes some sense.
And in fact, that's the exact language that you use in paragraph 4 there, is that they are being asked to win back lost business, right?
Paragraph on point 4 early, yeah, and then there's a separate 4, sorry. Yeah. But I don't know if that's corresponding to the production issue or not.
Sure. And then...
Could be we have better reps and they lost business to better,
Sure.
Influence.
And you say that because this type of sales marketing works, right? The more you're in the field, the more you're going to sell.
Objection.
That is not a direct correlation. I've had people that are, can go see a provider 10 times, within a 2-day period, and they can see him once, and it, the person once could do better. There is not a direct correlation to frequency.
But it's important to have a good sales force if you want to drive the sales.
Objection.
Not necessarily. I've had bad representatives that have done very well because they happen to have a geography that was just doing well.
And so I want to direct your attention to, you asked this question, what do we need to do? And you provide 5 bullet points. Is that right?
Yes.
And bullet point number 2 is be aware and hit your key targets with higher frequency to combat their share of voice when appropriate. Keep in mind that only a handful of physicians make all the difference. Did I read that correctly?
That's what it says on point 2.
And the concept that a handful of physicians make all the difference, because you have these large prescribers, and if you can get them switched over, you're going to really boost your sales numbers, right? That's what that means.
I'm going to object to the form of the question.
That's actually incorrect. It could be a handful of physicians that you have a relationship with. It could be a handful of physicians that utilize your therapy. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're a high target.
Well, they're a key target according to the language that's used in this email, right?
Everybody on everybody's territory is a key target.
Well, if that were true, why don't you just say hit your targets?
Because they have to discern what's important within their geography, and not always is it the highest frequency, or highest count per se of a script. It could be somebody. So, for instance, you could take a physician from 1 script to 4, and have 3 times the growth. And so that was important to them to know where they had good growth and relationships. So it could be a key target based on their interpretation of a key target.
Growth being the number of scripts they were writing.
Utilization of the therapy appropriately marketed by the PI and the FDA approved.
But the way that you guys measure growth is scripts, right?
Objection asked and answered.
I think it was one metric. They also had PennSaid in their bag as well, which is referenced in point 4 of the document. So this wasn't strictly just on Exalgo. It was every day that we pull through all that we were charged with to have providers consider our therapies and their bag of therapies that they potentially could use appropriately.
Well, PennSaid wouldn't have been affected by this Opana ER push by Endo, right? PennSaid is not competing with Opana ER.
No, but it's in my representatives' bags, and they represent more than just Exalgo, and they do more than just compete with Opana.
And you said that there are other factors that go into growth other than scripts. What are the other factors?
Identifying those who could be a zero. They need to identify their dirt of their territory to understand where potentially they can get growth at. Is it based on scripts? Yeah, that's a large portion of growth, but it's not just in key targets. So those who get that their entire book of business is important to them, and you could have a lower quantity provider that's just as important in growth than somebody who doesn't grow at all that writes a lot of a therapy. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. I'm still a little confused on what other than scripts constitutes growth.
I mean, that is the primary driver.
Is there any other driver?
Objection form asked and answered.
Yeah, no, I mean, with both therapies, Exalgo and Penset, it's more utilization. I think that they were also, as part of their yearly evaluation, it could be that they're hitting and doing the things that the company's asking them to do in regards to speaker utilization, as an example. So there's other things that they do within their day-to-day activity that could impact the job that they're doing when they're evaluated year over year. It's not just scripts.
$15?
Okay.
It's an email from you to your sales team of September 13th, 2012. Is that fair?
Yes.
And it's related to these Q1 fiscal year 13 target information and planning tool, right?
Target list adds in requests for change or removals.
And you say, team, I need everyone to scrub your list thoroughly before you send ads to me. We have already seen errors of targets added, pill mill docs re-added, etc. Please, please, please check your lists.
Mm-hmm.
Let me know of anything goofy going on with these. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
So here is where you use the term pill mill docs. That's your term, right?
That's not my term. That's often referenced by other people that bubble that to me, as they would refer to them. I don't own that term.
And it looks like your sales reps were trying to add in pill mill docs to their target list for fiscal year 13, right?
That's incorrect.
Well, the email states we have already seen errors of targets added, pill mill docs re-added.
Right, because this data is pulled from a master data dump, typically from IMS, and what would happen is people would repopulate, and in fact, more often than not are representatives across the country. We're trying to get folks that may have been abusive in the therapies potentially to be removed from their list as a distraction or put into what I would call a parking lot, to not be part of their goaling, or if they felt uncomfortable going to any particular office, we would tell them not to go. But the target list adds and requests, goofy, when I refer to the word goofy, we literally have had people on target lists, as I recall, that either moved out of the territory, were no longer practicing medicine, could have been in jail, could have died. And so when you have a dead practitioner on your list, that's goofy. So if they know that and they know their geography, they were instructed to scrub that for all the above to give us that feedback that we could forward back to the data team. But I didn't scrub lists. I didn't know the providers. This was provided back to Jen Terp, who is in, I believe, the data analytics, data team.
So the reference here to pill mill docs, which is the reference of how you described them. What was your understanding of what a pill mill doc was as you used it in this email?
Again, these would be the reps' interpretations that they bubbled up in the past that we referenced earlier in the day, like a Heather and others that use that term. If she had that term and she wanted to provide me a reason as to why they shouldn't be on a target list to provide to the data analytics team, that was something that was bubbled to me. It's anecdotally a very broad term, but it was one used more by reps than anybody as to a potential interpretation of abuse.
What were you trying to convey with the term pill mill docs?
Well, if they were a pill mill doc, as the reps had stated to me, what they were requesting is that we put them in a parking lot or potentially pull them off their list so that they wouldn't even talk to these folks. Exalgo is not generally abused by anybody because of the pharmacokinetics of the drug. So that wouldn't even be a good target for them to talk to.
Let's take a break.
Time on the monitor is 12:20.